So I'm here together with Luis Suarez at the Enterprise CEO Summit. You've been part yesterday also at a vivid discussion about how to enable the strategic importance of social within the company. What was your key aspect on this discussion?
Well, there were a couple of things that I talked about. So the first one is to try to, if you want to try, what you're trying to do is you're trying not to just put a set of tools, fancy tools to do the same work that was happening in the past. So you need to apply a new mentality and a new set of behaviors. And the best way of influencing those behaviors is by inspiring a new way of how people can work, right? And that's essentially doing a bit of a studying first of what are people's work habits, what they're good at, what they may not be that good at, identify patterns, identify use cases, and then help them understand how they can move into a much more open and collaborative way of working, right? So typically, from the experience that I have from IBM and everything else, one of the things that has worked really well for us is to make it as close to people's needs on their day-to-day job, right? So it's not that you're asking people to, leave a mile away or whatever else. You're asking them, this is how you work. Can we find a way where you can do things a lot easier, more effective, using social technologies? In the vast majority of cases, there is always the opportunity for a yes. And the opportunity is how do you enable them to do it? Now, obviously, because it's so aligned with the day-to-day work, you always have got that business mentality behind it, that business purpose. So adapting to that new way of working becomes a lot more natural than just being thrown out to the lions, trying to fix it and everything else, right? So that was one of the key messages from that session that I'm trying to share across. And then the other one is, and this has been a bit of a learning evolution for me over the course of the years. I've been involved with adoption and the social business revolution, so to speak, for a good number of years. And at the very beginning, I used to think that executive and management support was critical. And I no longer think so. I think that if you have an opportunity to come from the bottom up and make it like a grassroots effort, you can still have significant impact, because what you're doing is you're shifting work away from the traditional hierarchy of top-down into the network-driven, the horizontal work. And you can have significant impact that you can then go back to your executive and management teams and say, this is what I have achieved by doing this. And eventually, when you have multiple people doing that, you realize that management starts to understand that they don't even need to get involved anymore because people are doing their work more effectively. Right? So one of the things that I keep telling everyone is that when you start thinking about starting with your strategy or whatever, I don't believe that having executive and management support is critical. It's good and healthy if you have it, right? But you shouldn't invest too much time on it. You should invest more time in terms of, what is the vision that you want to achieve? What do you want to do for your end users that are your colleagues and everything else, and enable them. And then let the actual massive the network effect pay on its own, right? And eventually what will happen is that management and executives, they will realize that if they don't come on the boat, they will miss the boat. And they are the ones who need to leap forward into that way of working.
2 years ago, we did our last video interview, and you were a little bit skeptical about the evolution of social within the company. Right. Did this change now?
It did change. And actually, it changed as well as a result of the conversations that I have had over the last 2 years, where the conversation has evolved to no longer have a business process focus coming from a technology focus, and now it's more down into practices and rituals. So it's back again to that behavior and that mindset, right? So, we started with the technology focus because that's the most tangible thing that we had. Then everyone said, okay, let's go and tie it in with the business processes because that's when we have the business paying attention to it. And now people are thinking, no, hang on for a second. This is more about the philosophy. This is about having that open mentality to come to work, not with the opportunity to say, don't bother me, I'm busy, into saying, how can I help, right? And that has, over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, certainly the last 2 years, has transformed how we actually view the impact of social business. So I'm a lot more optimistic now than I was 2 years ago. And also, in terms of how we are understanding that this is all about behavior and about mindset, and how can we not change it, but influence the change, right? And I think that we're on the right path because there are certain conversations that are happening online and also in the various different events like the Enterprise 2.0 Summit here, where you see how technology is hardly ever mentioned. Processes, you have got the odd session here and there, and it's all more about organizational change. It's all about more like, how do you facilitate that change? How do you embrace that change? How you realize that it's not about provoking an abrupt change that is very disruptive, how you go in incremental chunks and you achieve better results from it in terms of how you can transform that population and how they think and how they actually work. Now, are we there yet? No. I mentioned, and this was part of what I mentioned, I was a bit of a skeptic 2 years ago. We still have got that issue around employee engagement, where the numbers are not as good as they probably should be in terms of how motivated employees feel about the work that they do. And I think that that's going to be, now that we're shifting into that behavior, practice, ritual mentality, I think that we're going to see a massive shift in terms of how employees are engaged in the work that they do.
What were your key takeaways from the conference?
I think that the main key takeaway that I have is the evolution of the conference. I've been coming, thanks to you for having me for all the course of the years. I think it's been 4 or 5 years, and I have seen the evolution of how what started as the Enterprise 2.0 Summit, purely technology-driven in most cases, it has transformed into that business side and now into that organizational change side, right? So I'm not saying that the conference is turning into a HR conference, but it's certainly tackling the issues that hardly anyone else is talking beyond of how you inspire new behaviors, how do you get right mindset. And the sessions that we have been having this year, they all talked quite effectively about how they are provoking that transformation, not only from that technology and processes, but also from that mindset. And it's been very refreshing to have, top-notch quality speakers saying, the tools are good, the processes are there, but let's really focus on the people and how we can help them understand the new way of working. And that's been very refreshing, absolutely. That's my main key takeaway.
Great. Thank you for the interview.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.